So I wanted to start with this topic of gratitude because partly because, as I mentioned, it's a little bit opposite to the habitual patterns of thought that we get stuck in. And I think, it's difficult to be clear about these cultural differences, but I think more in this contemporary Western society than in traditional societies like Tibet. Because, I think the kind of materialist consumer culture that is around us tends to encourage an attitude of taking things for granted, that we should have everything and we haven't got enough anyway. Whatever we've got, we haven't got enough. And it's a passive attitude, and it's not one that's helpful if we want to develop spiritually. So that word, perhaps I need to talk about that word because it's a debated word. There are a lot of people, who are very anti-religious. We know that, and we can understand some of the reasons for that. But there's also in our present world, there's a bit of a division between people who appreciate spirituality per se and people who don't. And spirituality can get mixed up with religion. So in common with quite a few other people, I kind of wish there was another word because I don't want us to think about it in that way. That's perfectly valid. But here, it's kind of like that with that word has an association that it's an optional thing that, you might be interested in spirituality or you might not. What I want to talk about on this course, as much as possible, as much as I'm able to, is things that are universal. So something that's universal is aspiration. I think, unless we're in quite a serious state of depression, we all have aspirations of some sort. And some of those aspirations, may seem to be very materialistic. Or I want to be rich, I want to be famous, etc. But behind that, there's always something else that there is. Maybe sometimes not very fully conscious, we're not quite aware of what it is, but there's a sense of something in us that wants to be fulfilled, that wants to be fully expressed, that wants to bring something into the world that is unique, perhaps, or that is has something to do with who or what we essentially feel that we are. It's often talked about as creativity. And again, there's some misunderstandings with that word. Creativity is sometimes understood as just doing something new, anything that's new. It's not been done before. So some recent or contemporary art things, I look at and I think this object painting or whatever it might be, it's only been created because the person who created it thinks what you need to do to be creative is to do something that nobody's done before, whatever it might be. And that's not my understanding of what creativity really is. What is creativity? Very deep question. But I don't want to kind of get too hung up on the artistic side, because what I'm talking about isn't necessarily to do with artistic creativity. And we talk about self-expression, and that's also sometimes got a bit of a bad press as part of Western individualism. We want to do something that is, perhaps we want to do something excellently. And again, that can become obsessional. What is it? You know, this is an inquiry, so I'm not kind of going to try and give you the answer to what is it. But there is something within each of us that is a deeper sort of sense of striving for something. Now, we may not be in touch with that all of the time, or very much of the time, possibly. But sometimes, you know, there are moments in our life, I'm sure for every one of you, where you've had a sense of, I want to do X, Y, or Z. And it might be, you know, to create music. It might be to become a bodhisattva. Might be, you know, it could be in any area of life that something, when I come towards the end of my life, I'll be able to look back on and say, how great that I managed to do that. So if it's making $1 billion, you know, whether that is an authentic aspiration or a good thing to aspire to, I think isn't written in stone. It depends on why you want that. And somebody raised the question, what do I want by getting what I want? So, you know, it might be, for some people, that might be a good aspiration. And it will depend not only on why they're doing it, but on how they do it as well. But the question that I want to place in your minds, and they're going to work with this week, is, what is it that I most deeply want to do in my life? What is it that at the end of my life, if I've done it, I will look back and say, this was the life, I've lived my life the way that I wanted to live it, that I would have wanted to live it. So I think that's a very important question. I guess we all ask ourselves that question from time to time. And then, you know, when we ask ourselves that question, when something, when it takes fire within us, and we think, yes, I'm going to do this, that, or the other, and then we embark on that. So we create a bit of a change of direction in our life. But then after a while, that spark of enthusiasm and passion gets a little bit lost, and we get bogged down in the day-to-day problems of life. And sometimes we think, oh, well, that's never going to happen. That was just a dream. And what are we without our dreams? Well, this is where I want to start. And this is how I'm understanding spirituality, you know, not just that it's any aspiration that we feel passionate about, but there's this question of what's authentic. What is it that I might want to do or to become that I would have reason to be proud of, really? There's no automatic answer, as I say, that it's a deep inquiry. The deep inquiry to find out what I do want, and also to examine it carefully to make sure that it is authentic. It's not something that I've just got from somebody else, it's my parents or the society or whatever, or that those influences may have distorted my true aspiration, my true heart wish, if you like. What is my true heart wish? That, I think, is a really good question to start from. And if we think we found it, then we start to feel a little bit of discomfort around it. Looks like then we haven't quite got there. Maybe we're near the target, but we've misidentified it just slightly, and we need to go a little bit deeper. So I started with gratitude because we are, remarkably fortunate to be able to think in this way. If we look throughout history and around the world, and even in our own society, how much opportunity most people really have, first of all, in view of their actual circumstances and the pressures on them of survival or whatever, how much opportunity they may have to think in this way. But secondly, even if they do have relatively fortunate circumstances, many people don't have or haven't happened to meet the influences in their life that make it something that's at all obvious or natural for them to really think about or to think deeply about. So I think, it's sadly, many people go through their lives with ambitions and aspirations that really are not worthy of their true potential, their true nature. We all have tremendous potential. And it's something that has only become really apparent to many people, actually, very recently. I think even when I was young, there was much less awareness of this, this idea of the human potential. And sometimes it can be trivialized, a little bit sort of new age, like instant spirituality, like instant coffee, Human potential can be seen to be something that's very easy to actualize, and so we just use the right flower essences or whatever, and our human potential will suddenly be there. Well, it's a bit more hard work than that. But nevertheless, there is a really growing awareness of that. It's not just people who have special, very rare genes that they become musical geniuses or artists or whatever. It's not just these strange, extraordinary, special people that we can't aspire to be, but everyone has the potential to do something beautiful and wonderful. So that's part of our journey on this course. That's part of the idea that we're going to, in the traditional presentation of Buddhism, there's a tendency for it to kind of lay it down for you. Well, this is what you should be aspiring to, which can be, it can be unhelpful sometimes. Of course, it can be done more skillfully, but I think this is the fundamental question. We have the answer within ourselves. It's not always easy to find. That's why, as I say, it's an inquiry. It's not something with a pre-programmed answer. So, yes, we do have an amazing collection of fortunate circumstances that open up this potential. So we're going to spend a little bit of time this week looking at what that might be. And hopefully, so the intention is for each of us to become a little bit clearer about what is my true heart wish, what is the direction I want to go in my life. And I think it's very important, it doesn't really matter whether we finally get there. I've been particularly a bit more in this COVID situation where I'm at home a bit more. I've been practicing the piano, which I've played for many years, and I'm almost certainly never going to become a great concert pianist, but I want to go in that direction. I love music, and so I'm working very hard on learning to play a piece which I will never be able to play in a way that anyone would probably pay money to hear. But it doesn't matter. I'm going in that direction. I have a cat scratching at the window, but I'm going to let her in. Excuse me. Come on. Sorry for the interruption. Okay. And I also just want to say one more thing about the gratitude practice. I have a sense, and we'll see how it goes this week, that this practice of gratitude will actually help to open up a sense that our potential is available to us, because this is the biggest problem, is that we may recognize in theory, especially if we study Buddhism, everybody has a complete potential, to become omniscient Buddha or whatever, which all seems very, remote and out of sight. And we often, in practice, in reality, we don't really quite believe it. So if we don't, if we just pay lip service to, oh yes, I have the same human potential to be enlightened as the Buddha had, so, that's okay. But we don't really kind of get it down here in the gut, we don't really think I can do that. Or even if we think, well, I should aspire to become a Buddha, but actually that doesn't quite gel with the reality of my own deepest, wishes. It might not kind of expressed in that expressing in that way might not be what's appropriate for who I am. Might be something else. So of course, to become a master musician, for instance, that's some people's have that passionate aspiration. I don't have it to that degree to become one, but some people do, and I don't think those people achieve anything less than someone who is very successful at meditation necessarily. So I don't want to kind of prescribe the answer, is what I'm saying. It's for each one of us to find out. So gratitude practice is a very good recipe for happiness, actually. And I'm grateful to Sarah for raising the question. Oh, it's difficult because I have anxiety and things, and I'm anxious of losing things, because like everything, the way to improve is to practice, isn't it? So it is this big trap in meditation that I don't know how it is for Tibetans or other people from other Asian cultures or whatever. But for Westerners, I know this is a big trap, and I, have suffered from this a lot. It's like, oh well, I'm not doing it right. I can't. I'm not good at meditation. And the thing is, it comes with practice, like everything else. So don't worry if it's not, you're not kind of having 10 minutes of continuous sort of free-flowing gratitude with no obstacles to it, because that's kind of not surprising, because we don't do it all the time. We need to practice it, get better at it, and then it does bring some peace and joy into the mind. And these is very good fuel for trying to avoid the word spiritual practice. Maybe I'll, as I go through, I'll start to find some more neutral terms for some of these words that are a bit associated with traditional religious presentations. But anyway, we all understand. But I do want to emphasize it is helpful to get away from those associations to some extent. Even if we are committed Buddhists, I think it's very helpful to understand the spiritual path, we call it that, from a different perspective, from a non-religious, from a purely secular perspective, from a universal perspective. Both because it helps us to communicate with people who may be, not particularly receptive to anything to do with religion, but also because it helps us to connect the understanding that we get, perhaps through Buddhist teachings, with the culture that we actually belong to. The secular Western culture, most of us. So I think, there's some real value to reframing the question of spiritual practice in a way that just embeds it in the general culture rather than having its own special language. Of course, that's very useful for some things, but anyway, I'm going to stop there and we'll take a few questions, and then we're going to have a short break and some more questions. So thank you for listening, and let's just